Hey everybody, this is Alex. This is the 14th episode of the Dresden Files podcast. Today we have Justin and Alex returning. And we also have a new guest, Steven. Steven, you want to say hi?
Hey, what's up, everybody?
And Justin.
Hello again.
And director Alex.
I got a book.
And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Before we start, you can find us at DresdenFilesPodcast.com. There you'll find all the links for iTunes, our RSS feed. You can search us on YouTube, Dresden Files Podcast. Really helps if you subscribe on iTunes or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Even if you don't watch or listen in either one of those places, it really helps us. It legitimizes the show. The more viewers, the more views, subscribers, and ratings we have, it helps. You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/DresdenCast, and you can also find us on the Dresden Files subreddit, reddit.com/r/Dresden Files. Steven is a special guest this week, so kind of has to do with what I'm going to talk about. Giving us feedback is important. It helps the show, and Steven gave us some feedback, and that's how he got on the show. Steven, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, okay. My name is Steven. Living in Colorado currently, originally from, Washington. Started reading the books, 5-6 years ago. Yeah, and I going to school right now, work in a restaurant, so.
Cool. Why don't you tell us your 3 favorite books and your favorite character?
Okay, so definitely my favorite character just has to be Harry Dresden. When I picked up the first book, by the end of it, I remember kind of thinking like, oh, this isn't terribly well written, but it sure is a lot of fun. And what made it fun for me was Harry Dresden just himself, his snark, his sense of humor, his references. I loved all of that, and that's really kind of what got me into it. And I remember even picking up the second one and the third one and thinking like, oh, these are, kind of a guilty pleasure, but I just like Harry so much. He's so funny to me. That's why I kept reading him. My 3 favorite books actually I would have to go with Deadbeat, White Knight, and Turncoat. Deadbeat, a big thing about Deadbeat for me was that was the first book when I personally realized, like I said earlier, like I thought it was kind of almost a guilty pleasure kind of a thing. And with Deadbeat, that was the first time where I like sat down afterwards and was like, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on. Me personally, that's just when it really hit me. Like, this isn't just a monster of the week kind of serial. He's really putting in layers and carrying things from different books and like building this like huge epic thing. And so that was a big thing. I also Deadbeat, Sue, Poco will never die, all of that kind of stuff. Butters. I think Butters is an awesome character. He's a nerd like us, I think, and you definitely can relate to him a lot. Some of my other favorite books, Turncoat. I love Turncoat. Turncoat's got one of the has an awesome battle at the end of it, which I love. I love the fact, I love all the snark that's going on between Molly and Harry and Morgan, and then even I can't remember her name. The leader of the Wardens, Lucio.
Yep.
Lucio. Is that how you say it? Lucio?
Lucio. Yep.
Yeah. I've never listened to the audiobook, so I might maim a lot of words. But yeah, I love all the snark and all the stuff that goes in there. I also really like the fact that like Harry actually gets the bad guy through his detective work, which he doesn't always do. Sometimes it's just him being a detective and just finding stuff out and then showing up and laying the smack down. I love the fact that he planned ahead in that time and he had the other PI guy watching the ways, so he was able to finger Peabody. I thought that was just a great piece of writing because it's Harry's always kind of behind the ball in a lot of the books, and in that one, and in that instance, he was ahead of the ball, and I really like that. Um, that's also another thing with White Knight, which I know this is a contentious opinion, but White Knight's another one of my favorite ones because it does showcase. I do feel like Harry is, detecting stuff in that book. He he leaves the order, the order of the Black Cauldron, and then he talks to Lash, and then he has to go back because he realized there was someone else there that he didn't even realize. And there's a lot, and then he's like, snooping on his brother, and like he's trying to figure out what's going on, and I really like that. I just like Lash as a character. I thought she was really interesting. I also really like the SmackDown in the flashback SmackDown in the middle of the desert with the ghouls, and you just getting to see Harry go off the rails. Like that's an awesome piece of the awesome piece. Also the ending, that ending battle where he has the others show up, and it's he says it's Cal, or summoning others and all that stuff, and the duel before then with Ramirez and the two vampires, and then leading up to the others invading, and then Marcone showing up through the ways, like it's just an awesome battle. Again with the snark, that little when he's giving his demands to Laura at the end of that book too, where he's like, he says, "Oh, and free all the little people. Oh, and I need some mouthwash too." Like I just Yeah, some of my favorite scenes are in that book. So yeah, those are my top three for sure.
Yes, we had a wonderful moment of gloating in Justin's face. Cool. So some news. Justin, why don't you talk about your special news?
Yeah, so earlier this week, technically, depending on how you split the week anyway, on the 15th, I actually had my first baby, and I'm looking at him right now, and he's adorable. And people say he looks like me and he's adorable, so I don't think those two things can be at the same time, but yeah, that's it's awesome, and it's exhausting, and it's everything you've heard about and way more than they'll ever tell you. I think they keep it that way so that people keep having kids. But yeah, it's awesome, and I love him, and he's adorable. And yeah, so news, hooray!
And Justin just shared a picture with us that I'm totally going to be tweeting after this because it's hilarious and cute and adorable. Um, yeah. And my little bit of news is from follow-up from last episode. I got a book. Jacob sent me the signed copy of Proven Guilty. It's signed. I'm so happy. Okay, I'll stop talking about it now.
It's weird because they sent me one too. Oh, I'm just kidding.
So that's the news. Congratulations, Justin. We're all very happy for you. And Director Alex, we're happy for you. All right. So, Director Alex, do you want to take us into the show and what we're talking about, which will be identity and what makes a person bad, good, stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. So the feedback that Stephen had given us on the subreddit was mostly in the fact that we kind of failed to talk about something kind of interesting in the last episode. So when we were discussing, like, is Marcone a bad guy? Is Leah a bad guy? Like, why don't we just talk about what makes a bad guy? What makes him a good guy? And what will it mean for Harry to be working with them or aligned with them, especially come the big apocalyptic trilogy? So what is a bad guy in the Dresdenverse?
Nicodemus. Nicodemus is a bad guy.
And yet Harry has worked with them a lot.
Well, Harry only worked with him at the behest of what's her name, Mab, right? When else has he worked with him?
Mab, who's also arguably a bad guy.
I disagree with that, but we can circle around that.
So going to the question then, other than pointing to people and saying you're a bad guy and you're a good guy and you're a bad guy, which is very McCarthyism, and we hate you because you're not my neighbor or whatever. Like, what defines the villain? Like, are we doing it based off of actions? Are we doing it based off of nature? What are we looking for?
Good place to start. Why don't we each give our own explanation, at least in the scope of the Dresden Files, what we think is an evil, makes a character evil. Director Alex.
Well, I agree with Butcher's view that no one is the bad guy in their own story, so they've always got a purpose. But they might be more alien than others. Like Marcone definitely has some sort of purpose that he's going for, and he thinks of himself as a good guy. And I would consider him a good guy too, even though he's like this grayly chaotic good kind of type. Like, he won't hurt kids. I think we can all agree with that. That's a good thing. But Leah, like, she's always doing something that she thinks is good in her own weird way. And I consider her a good guy because she's on Harry's side and always has been, and has like understandings of how it affects him and why. Like Bob doesn't understand morality. Leah does to a certain extent. And
Well, I just want a point of information. Marcone, and Harry likes to remind Marcone of this, that he actually does hurt children by hurting the families of children, right? If a mother or father is using drugs and neglecting their child, that's pretty much on Marcone.
those parents would probably be using drugs whether Marcone was involved or not. But Marcone can make sure that the kids are not directly involved. They're not the ones that are using the drugs, not the ones stealing it or getting killed.
Marcone's still giving them the drugs. He's still selling them the drugs and ruining their lives. I'm going to be last because I'm probably going to be having a different opinion than most of the people here. Sorry, were you done?
More or less.
And you think that? Well, all right, we'll come back to it. I mean, because I guess it's fair to say, I would say that Leah is neither good nor evil because she doesn't have a choice in her actions.
Well, she absolutely has choices. But I'm talking more about good guy versus bad guy, not evil versus good, which is a slightly distinct difference going on there.
Well, I would say that all evil characters are also bad guys. Or sorry, yes, anyone who is evil is a bad guy. Not all bad guys are evil.
I think it's an interesting point. So, because I think Marcone's a bad guy. I don't know if I believe that he's necessarily evil. So,
well, I'm of the opinion that all bad guys are evil. So that's probably. But again, we're going to circle back around. Steven, what do you think makes a character? I guess we can say both evil and bad. Like, what makes or do we want to just stick with bad guy?
Let's go with both.
All right.
We should. I think we should be talking about both because I think that to me that's the crux of the issue, is that there are bad guys. There are some times when Marcone is a bad guy, but in general, he's considered almost a good guy, and especially with like the society that he sets up and the way he helps with the Fomar in the later books. Like, he does some bad stuff, but then again, so does Harry. Harry's done some questionable stuff too, and so to me, that's I think that's where it's all going. Is that Harry is going to be forced to use eviler and eviler people by the end. Yeah, and he's going to have to, because I think at the end it's going to be reality versus the outsiders, and even if you're super, super evil like Nicodemus, or, I kind of think that you could argue that he's even worked with, what was the black vampire that burned off his hand?
Mavra.
Mavra. He did a job for her, getting the book, The Word of Kemlar, and then giving it to her. And yeah, you could argue that he was compelled, but that's kind of Harry's shtick. He's always compelled. He's never...
Yeah, I'm going to say a blanket statement here that might be incorrect, and we can argue it. I think that every time Harry has worked with a bad guy, he's been compelled to do so.
Yeah, but, what about, in the beginning of the books, he was running in terror from even the mention of his fairy godmother, and he, and Mab was even worse, but
Except for her. But I don't believe that Mab's a bad guy.
Yeah. Well, if Mab's not a bad guy, then why does humanity and why does reality need Summer to protect us from Winter? Because that's...
Justin?
Yeah, I don't think Summer's there to protect us. I think Summer is there to check Winter's balance. Like I think that's an important distinction because if I remember right, it's in Cold Days where he sees Titania like in person and she's ready to like melt Chicago if she had her way. Like she could give two shits about the rest of, you know, the mortal world just as much as Mab can. She's just the lesser power and she's the lesser power because the like 80-90% of Mab's power is checked by the outsiders because that's what Mab's job is. Titania's job is to check Mab's power. I don't know. It's the cosmology here that in the Dresdenverse gets a little weird on like who's checking who and why they're there and that sort of thing. Like why do we even need the queens in the first place? Which I think is one of the unanswered questions that we're hoping we'll see more. And spoiling a little bit of what you want to talk about later in the show, like I think that's a really big unanswered question. So
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, I think we've seen why we have the queens, though, with the, at least in their current iteration, we have the queens to check we have Winter to check the power of the outsiders, and we have Summer to check like you were just saying, like, I think that is their purpose. Personally, that's what I think, at least.
right, and I mean, I suppose we know the what, but I guess what I'm more curious about is the why and that sort of thing. And like, the outsiders are there, but we don't fully understand their motivations and why they're coming, unless it's just because that's what outsiders do. It's they want to break things that are pretty. I don't know. So, just to write it a little bit, talking about bad guys, like um, I think especially the three hosts here, they got a little bit of a taste on it that I'm typically like a black and white type of person. So, just because Marcone's like a little bit of a lighter black doesn't mean that he's not necessarily a bad guy. And it gets a little interesting because Butcher does like to play the grays, and so does Harry, and a lot of things. But Marcone is profiteering off of corruption and drug sales and all manner of things that are like the bane of a civilization, or at least what we've been taught are the bane of civilization for like the last 50 or 60 years. Leah is definitely like pretty much Winter Court in general, like in my opinion, you probably default as a bad guy, and there's a couple of exceptions. Like you're going to tell me for an instant, knowing what we know about the Dresden Files and the universe at large there, that even Santa Claus himself hasn't murdered somebody in cold blood and hasn't done something during while he was under the guise of the hunt or at some other point. And then we got to talk about masks and stuff. So whatever. The point is, like, if we want to talk bad guys, I mean, Black Court, they're pretty much like they are Bram Stoker's evil vampires. They are the bad guys there. Red Court, anybody who feeds off of human lives and human suffering. I think that's a pretty good line to draw, actually. Certainly anybody who has violence against women and children are all already in my shit list, and so that's one of the things where it's hard to classify Marcone because he's only like 60% evil. He's not like Nicodemus, where he pretty much Nicodemus is like, I don't know, is it funny because maybe I'll kill him? Does it further some goal that I've had for 2,000 years? Because then maybe I'll kill him. So I think there are levels. Like some people are more or less evil than others, but Marcone's definitely a bad guy. And if you were to take everybody else out of the picture, Marcone and Harry would be butting heads. Marcone would be the villain of the story, and it would be this wizard versus Marcone and his tricks. So that's one thing that's interesting is that he uses some of these people as leverage against other people, and vice versa. They leverage him against Nicodemus or some other villain. So it's it's kind of interesting, but that's my take. So
kind of stole my thunder. I mean, the reason why I normally answer this question, what is evil, or who is evil, or who is bad, in the Dresden Files with Nicodemus, is because he is the definition of it. But I guess I mean, to further answer that question, I mean, pretty much any character that has done bad things to innocent people is a bad guy, in my opinion. And especially when you're talking about murder, you're talking about like ruining people's lives. You know, Marcone has straight up murdered innocent people a lot. He is a bad guy that is irredeemable. Period.
Do you have like source proof of Marcone murdering innocent people?
All
Because
gangsters have murdered innocent people. That's what makes them gangsters. There's no way he got to without having murdered innocent people.
That's not a definition I knew.
There's
It's not okay. It's not like a Red Court vampire where you had to have killed someone in order to become a vampire. I don't think so.
I mean,
I don't think
didn't he
there's ever been text proof of Marcone killing someone who wasn't also what you'd call a bad guy, like Torelli.
There's at least
provide proof.
There's at least proof in that he shoot the girl.
No, he didn't shoot the girl. It was his fault that she died because someone was trying to shoot him, I think.
Yes.
Is that what it was?
Yes.
But who actually shot her?
The Vargases.
And that's where his drive to become.
It's so another character that I like to use as an example of a bad guys from a different series is Severus Snape. Snape, you never explicitly see him kill someone, but you know because he's a Death Eater and the right hand of Voldemort, that he did kill innocent people, or he worked towards the death of innocent people. It's just a fact of what makes Marcone Marcone, and what makes Snape Snape. I mean, are you really going to disagree with that? So even if he didn't kill innocent people, he worked towards their deaths, or ordered their deaths.
I'm just saying that the people he's killed are probably not innocent in the way that you would define it.
But I also don't think that. I don't know. I think Marcone is one of the better, more gray characters, but I still think he's a bad guy because he, on a massive scale, has done really bad stuff.
I mean, so yes, he deals drugs. He has killed people. Their innocence behind. Like, but what if there's more to it? Like, there's a purpose, kind of in the way that Nicodemus is thought to be trying to defend against the outsiders.
The ends do not justify the means. That's my view.
I mean,
the ends never justify the means.
But then
never.
What about? I mean, Harry killed Susan. Harry killed the previous White Knight. I mean, Harry's killed. You know, he's used some pretty gray means, some pretty black means sometimes to get to his ends.
But pretty much the only time he's killed someone is even when they say like he killed the corpse taker in cold blood, he still killed her because she would have killed him. I don't know if there's an example where Harry killed someone who wasn't going to kill him, or kill someone who would.
Lloyd Slate.
Lloyd Slate was going to kill someone who was either going to kill him.
No, he wasn't. He was a tortured husk.
Yeah, but Lloyd Slate hurt people that were friends of Harry and lots of other.
Yeah, so. But then, like, he was not going to be hurting anyone else until, like, he was never going to get away from that.
You could argue
and Harry killed him for his own purposes. You
could argue he's not murdering him. Because Slate asked Harry to kill him. Right? Slate wanted it.
Just to jump in a second, I'm gonna muddy the waters a little bit by saying that Harry's our hero, but he's not a good guy, right? And even Harry himself is worried about that. I mean, certainly he's got good attributes, he's got bad attributes, but if you want to look for the lawful good, the hero type, you need to look at Michael. Like, clearly, This is a dude who's all but never done anything wrong. Like, I mean, we could get into the religious ramifications of all have sinned and, you know, all that stuff. And you see that in The Warrior, I think, is the short story where, you know, he has to chase down the priest and whatnot. Michael is a good guy. Harry is an anti-hero. He's the Batman. He's the guy who's going to split the hair. He's going to break the laws. He's going to do what it's needed to get the job done. And sometimes that crosses the line. And hell, I mean, Harry, by his own admission, he would burn down the entire world to save his daughter, and then they would roast marshmallows. Like, that's not even just villainous. That's psychotic. So. But he does draw these hard lines, and he typically winds up on, like I think Alex, you were saying, he basically does it to try and protect the innocent. That's usually his end goal, is that he's trying to save somebody. He's trying to prevent more harm. If you look at some of the things like the corpse taker and things like that. But he's not. I don't want to hear anybody put him on a pedestal where he's like the end all good guy versus Nicodemus is the end all bad guy, because he doesn't belong there.
Very good points, but
Wait.
Oh,
Nicodemus
okay.
definitely does is the be all bad guy. Sorry, continue.
I don't agree with that one.
He is.
Not really.
All right, we'll come back to it.
Well, I wanted to ask you, like, if Marcone is 60% bad guy, what if he's doing it because he knows, kind of like Nicodemus does, that the big apocalyptic trilogy is coming, that the outsiders are coming, and he needs to be stronger. So he's working with the Valkyries and Einherjar and trying to get everyone in his realm to be as powerful as it can so that he can protect more people. He can protect his area. Does that make him a better guy? Does he make him a good guy? Yes, I said Marcone.
No, because he's still doing terrible things. I mean, I think Harry only does those terrible things when he has to, when he has another choice. Or when he doesn't have any other choice.
There's always a choice, and Marcone is probably doing the same thing that Harry's doing.
Yeah, you gotta think about it. We see Harry's story from Harry's perspective, so we know that he's always doing the right thing. Like, maybe if we saw the story from Marcone's perspective, maybe we would understand it. Heck, maybe even if we saw, because Nicodemus has kind of hinted that he's had plans, kind of like what you were saying with maybe he's trying to fight against the outsiders. Because I think his coin is like straight evil, or is one of the things that might be straight evil, but I don't know that Nicodemus himself is like 100% just pure evil. Honestly, his wife seems more evil than her. Like, she seems like crazy and psychotic and willing to kill people for no reason. He seems like he has a plan and he's doing stuff. But
all right, we're definitely talking about that after then, because we'll talk about that after. Justin.
Well, yeah, I mean, to talk about what you just said, if Nicodemus isn't 100% evil, he's 99% evil, and I think you're probably right, Stephen, in the sense that we at least can't believe that he's irredeemable, because that's the whole function of the Knights of the Cross, right? Even the Knights don't believe that he's 100% irredeemable, even Nicodemus. So even after 2,000 years, even after his his plagues, his machinations, his apocalypse that he's trying to bring about, I do think that there's been enough teased where he thinks that he's trying to stop the outsiders in some twisted way. But circling back a little further, talking about Marcone, I don't think at all that Marcone has been gathering power because he sees the outsiders are coming. I don't think he's had any insight into that whatsoever, other than what has come about because of Harry. And I think Marcone is just gaining power and grabbing power because of Harry Dresden, and that's always how it was. He started out with Guard just that much as an advisor, and the more that paid off, the more money he sunk into it. I think eventually he became a signatory to the Accords because he knew that he could use that as leverage against Dresden. If he was worried about the outsiders, I don't think he'd ever become a signatory of the Accords. And I think the Einherjar and everything else is just evolution of his partnership with Guard and that sort of thing. And clearly that's going to be a thing that pays off in our favor, because they're Odin's people, and Odin's really on Harry's side, and Marcone is sort of, he winds up on Harry's side as much as not. But Marcone, like, if we talk about the days where the Beckett's kid got killed and that sort of thing, Marcone didn't give two shits about that. He was out there for the money and for the power, which is a typical gangster ploy anyway.
Well, I think that Marcone is at least aware that something bad is coming just because of how closely he has to be working with Vatarung. And Vatarung clearly knows what's going on. And if they have a relationship in that obviously Marcone's giving him shit tons of money in order to have the Einherjar and everywhere, he's also giving favors because that's the way that people give and take power. And that amount of knowledge and favors, I'm pretty sure Marcone is aware of what's going on.
It could be too. Maybe Marcone isn't, but we know Odin is. So maybe Odin is purposefully helping Marcone for another reason, not because he really wants him to have this power, but he knows that he needs he needs Immortal to have kind of these that Marcone is going to have a part to play, and Odin knows he needs those powers. So maybe he's being prepared, kind of like Harry has been prepared in some ways for the things that are coming, but he doesn't explicitly know that he's being prepared.
Well, all right, hold on, because we weren't done talking about Nicodemus, so we can come back to Marcone. Let's try and keep it on one at a time. So, Stephen, can you one more time reiterate what you said about Nicodemus? You say he's not a pure evil, pure bad guy?
Well, I think his coin, is it Anduriel? Anduriel?
I think is Anduriel, yeah.
Anduriel? I think his coin might be one of the purest things of evil because it's kind of evil from the white god. But Nicodemus is almost completely in control, unlike other Denarians that we've seen. So Nicodemus himself, no, I don't know that I don't think he's 100% evil. I personally think Harry will need him when the big ass apocalyptic trilogy comes. But
wait, so do you believe that Nicodemus is the one making the decisions about how to act?
Yeah, I think he's in control.
And the decisions that he's made have resulted in the deaths of thousands, possibly, of innocent people. That's from Nicodemus' own mouth, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, if he's been around 2,000 years, it's probably millions, but yeah.
So,
I mean,
he's tried to commit genocides and tried to commit plagues. I mean, how is that not, to me, that just immediately is 100% evil. How is he not a 100% chaotic evil person?
Well, this kind of goes, like I just said a little bit, this kind of goes into where I think the series is going. But what if, would it be okay to commit genocide to save the world? Like, if you know,
No.
if everyone is going to die, everybody, or you can kill off 1 million people that are in South America, what is that something that is that a decision that you could, you obviously think that's still evil, but for all we know from his perspective, he's gaining power and doing things to set up the world in a certain way so that he could fight the outsiders, or he could fight something else. Like, we just, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, maybe not all of his actions, like Harry's actions, maybe they're not all done. Maybe some of his actions are evil. They're bad, but they're not done. They're done for, an altruistic, goals. Like, he even says when he's trying to recruit Harry or distract Harry from the fact that they're going to kidnap Ivy in, is that Small Favor?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. In Small Favor, he even says, like, we should work together. Like, our goals are not that dissimilar. So that to me that's a big tell. Like, I don't think he's the ultimate end all be all evil.
I think he's fucking lying. He's lying, and he's insane, and he's evil. And I guess one of us could be right and the other could be wrong, and we might not know until the end of the series. We might not ever know. But I think he's crazy. I think he's evil. And honestly, I don't know if I could say whether or not I would commit a genocide to save the world, but I would try as hard as possible to do it in a way to save the world in a way that wasn't committing genocide. And I feel that is what Harry's done, and to a degree that is what Marcone's done. And that isn't what Nicodemus has done, because Nicodemus is an arrogant bastard.
All of those things I think are true, but you're talking about tells, and I think it is important that Nicodemus is like, well, hold on a minute, like we're not all that different. But I do think that's a classic villain play. And speaking of just the D&D player quibble, real quick, Nicodemus is the lawful evil one. If anything, Tessa's the chaotic evil one. Just thought I should point that out. But what I want to say though is
chaotic evil also.
okay. What I want to say is when we're looking at the big picture, like you were bringing up, Steven, sorry, whichever. I just want to see, like, what do you think he's going to do once it's done? Like, I think that's going to be one of the tells. Like, what Nicodemus does in the short term is to get his goals done. But let's say he defeats the outsiders, then what? Then he's the most powerful force in the world, or one of them. He's going to use that power as leverage against Mab, against the White God, against the mortal forces of the world, like governments and secular authority. Like, it's not like he's just going to roll over, that he's saving reality and then he's going to be a big hero. He's a tyrant, and that's what I think is like. Sure, yes, he may be our bad guy for 15 minutes when the time comes, but afterwards we're going to have to depose him because he will be the next biggest, baddest thing we have to fight. Currently, the biggest, baddest thing is the outsiders, but we can't lose perspective of the fact that if we gave him everything he wanted, if we allowed him to do his plans to overthrow the outsiders, we'd then have this tyrant character that we would have to overthrow, or we'd have to deal with as well. And that's kind of the same thing where I throw Marcone on the bad guy side, where it's like, let's say they get everything they want, they save the day, so to speak, they fix everything, and then we have to fight them, because it's not like he's not going to George Washington. He's not just going to be like, well, I freed a country and I'm just going to give the power back to the people. That's not the kind of characters that we're dealing with.
Oh, I completely agree with that. That they won't just give up power. But I also kind of think that's one of the things actually that I love about the Dresden Files, is that in regular fantasy, you have some farm boy who becomes the hero, and he's all good and stuff, and he magically learns magic or sword fighting in a short time and defeats the evil wizard or warlord or whatever. And really, like, if you were having to pick someone to go up against the most evilest person in the world, the goody two-shoer isn't going to win. It's going to be the guy who's a little bit less evil, in my mind. So I kind of, I definitely agree, and I kind of think that's where Dresden is going for with Harry a little bit, and all of it is, kind of subverting that trope of fantasy. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that it wouldn't be cake and dandelions and roses if Marcone or Nicodemus or Mavra or any of them, or Laura even, it wouldn't be a good thing, especially for humans. So.
Yep, that's what actually I'm thinking about it. That's another way I think of telling if someone's evil versus not evil. So I recently watched the Amazon series, The Men in the High Castle, which is based on the book of the same name, and that book is about if the Axis powers won World War II and occupied the United States, and you get to see like what it would be like. And so I really think that's kind of another line you can draw. So if Harry could shape the world in his own image, right, would it really be that much more different than it is right now? But if Nicodemus or even Marcone could shape the world in their own image, I believe it would be a lot more different than it is right now, in a much more negative way, especially if Nicodemus. What do you guys think? And then we're going to move on to another topic.
Well, it's interesting that we haven't mentioned her much, but along this line is that Laura is definitely a bad guy. She's got nothing redeemable about her, and it's pretty easy to just say she's a bad guy.
She's hot, but yeah.
Yeah, that's the only good thing about her, is that she's hot.
Right. Like so the vampire thing, I mean if we want to get there, you want to talk about moral gray areas. I think the vampires are interesting because on the one hand, every single one of them is fed to be where they are for the most part, except for maybe black court vampires because they don't explicitly call that, but the white court, they if they have sex before they have fallen in love, then their demon will just continue to grow and it'll feed and it'll take over. Red Court, it's very explicitly stated that the difference between the Red Court vampires and the guys at St. Giles is because the guys at St. Giles haven't fed yet. But there's almost nobody at St. Giles who won't eventually succumb to that is kind of the implication. And what I find interesting about that is that in almost every case, like all of the vampire kind are victims in some way. Like the white courts are the only ones born naturally, but red courts and black court, they're victims. They never chose that, but they do become this sort of nightmarish creature. And so when you talk about like morality and ethics, it's kind of interesting because they were turned. They didn't do it. But yeah, Laura's definitely a bad guy.
So, like, what about Mab? Is she a bad guy in some way? Because, like, I'm sure she's killed innocents, but she's also doing this good thing of protecting the outer gates, and she's this person that's helping Harry, sort of, in various ways when she's also not hurting him. So is she a bad guy?
It's interesting. I think I don't know if this has been retconned, but in the beginning, it's in one of the first 3 or 4 books, right? Isn't there a line about how fairies can't harm humans without humans having a debt towards them, something that contractually binds them?
If there's a contract between them, then they have a specific conduit to the mortal. Like, if Harry hadn't made the deal with Mab, Mab could have hurt him anytime she wanted because she had power over him. I don't know if that's the only way that they can hurt them. But other than that, like, the queens can't kill mortals. That's why they need the knife.
Right. So I would actually disagree with you and say that I don't think Mab, at least when we're talking about innocent humans, I don't think Mab has killed any innocent humans. She hasn't directly, I guess I'm using that argument incorrectly. I think, I don't know. Alex is smiling for our audio listeners. I think that, what I think is that it's like I said before, because she doesn't necessarily have a choice over her actions. Like fairies don't get an alignment. They're just what they are. Fairies,
but they do have choices.
They don't. They can't. They can't act against their nature. And Mab's nature.
They can't act against their nature in the same way I can't fly because I can't act against gravity.
Right.
But they still have choices.
No, their nature is what makes them do what they do, not their choice. That's the whole point of this, of fairy, of cold days, right? Guys, back me up. Anyone?
Well, so it's interesting that you talk about it because I believe that the fairy courts are forces of nature, right? But that doesn't mean that they don't have some aspect of evil or darkness or murder. I mean, Mab herself, I would put her in a similar sort of stance as Marcone, where currently she's our bad guy, and she probably hasn't ever murdered any mortal directly because she can't. But you don't think that she sent somebody like the Red Cap or the Rawhide to do it, or Rawhead, or even maybe not Maeve, but Leah, for crying out loud. Like, she has agents, Cat Sith, like, we're talking about, so the the Winter Court, the fairy, the Queen of Air and Darkness, for crying out loud, like, any of the nightmarish creature from the Grimm fairy tales are Winter Court. So, like, you've got to decide, are these just forces of nature and they're exempt from morality and ethics, or are they the villains because the Red Cap, his cap is red because he soaks it in his victim's blood? Like, these are all very evil creatures.
We're moving the discussion away from Mab. So we want to talk about, is Mab herself bad guy? Is she evil, right? Of course those creatures are evil. Yes, they're evil. That's their whole point of existing, right?
And she's the queen of them, but she's not evil.
That doesn't make her. They're for the most part, right? Especially we saw that cold days, they're operating on their own. They're not
Some of them,
right.
but
So let's bring the discussion back to, is Mab evil or not? I mean, so I think we're seeing evidence stacked against it, right? If a human can never be, if a fairy can't cross a human's threshold without good intentions, A, and B, it's really difficult for fairies to harm humans if they don't have a magically, any business together. Basically, what I'm saying is, I don't think any innocent human ever would have just randomly crossed Mab's hit list, or her gun sights or whatever. I think purely innocent humans, most don't even know who Mab is, or beyond the fairy tales. I don't think. I think that because of Dresden's perspective, you can use that argument in the same way. We've seen Mab in a certain light. I don't think she's an evil character. Steven, go ahead.
Oh, I think she's evil. I mean, you want to see actions? What about Lloyd Slate? She tortured him for 5 years, unendingly, healed him, and then tortured him again, or something like that. Or it was a couple of years, closer to 10. Like, to me, that's evil.
I would argue that Lloyd Slate consented to that when he became the Winter Knight and then betrayed her. So
it's like saying a thief that got caught consented to being arrested because he broke the law. What the fuck?
It's called a.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. That's called a. What's it called? There's a something contract.
You're blaming the victim.
A social contract. What?
You're blaming the victim. You're totally.
He's not a victim.
Look at what Lloyd Slate was wearing. Like, come on. Nothing. One more. Nothing justifies 10 years of friggin' torture. Like,
sure it does. It does.
No.
He knew that was what was going to happen when he made those choices.
That doesn't make her not evil for doing it. Like,
what? It's again, she doesn't have any choice in the matter. She can't.
Yes, she does.
She doesn't. That's what the.
She did not have to. She was not compelled.
That's what
to torture him.
Of course she was.
No, she wasn't. She wanted to do it because it was fun.
Director Alex.
He pissed her off, so she did it. But that's not.
She had to do that.
She has free will in her own way.
No,
she just doesn't have as much as a human.
She had to.
She can't tell a lie. That doesn't mean she doesn't have choices.
She had to show people of the Winter Court and the Never Never that she can't be betrayed like that.
That's the same thing that Marcone does. It's like in
But Marcone's not a fairy. He has the ability to.
No, but if he let Harry talk back at him publicly and then not do something to discipline Harry or say that Harry was on his side in some way, then Marcone would have been weakened and Marcone would have been killed. Is that not compelling in the same way that you're talking about Mab being compelled?
Because Mab has again, she's a fairy. She's not a human being. She doesn't have choice. She has to act that way. That's part of her nature.
Okay, so I have a more different question then, because what I'm feeling here is that, Alex and maybe even Steven and I are kind of approaching Mab as though she is like a mortal of types, like she isn't. She doesn't have free will in any appropriate sense in the books. I think it's brought up a couple of times that it's not that she doesn't have choices. Clearly she does. Like, she could make different decisions, but in many ways she's leveraged, and then in some ways with gift giving and receiving and telling truths and things like that, those are directly like the ground is solid. She cannot violate these things. So Alex, with your points though, are you taking the stance that she is outside of morality and ethics because she doesn't, like, because she's a force of nature, or what is it that you're using to justify this? Because
I don't know.
On the same side of the fence as Nicodemus, in my opinion. Like.
You guys are so wrong. Come on. Nicodemus is constantly, every second, choosing to use the power that the coin gives him. Every second he's doing that. How can you? Ugh. God damn it, you guys. Let me try and.
Steven, do you have thoughts while he tries to collect himself?
Yeah, but they just might make him more angry, so I don't know if I should voice them.
No, I'm not angry. Director Alex and Justin know that I'm not angry. It's definitely an interesting. It's an interesting point. I mean, no, I it's hard to say that she's not. I think this is, and I'm not trying to out myself here. I'm not trying to skirt around the question, but I think this is one of those situations that's we can't answer because, you know, Mab is wholly not human. She's an alien being. She doesn't operate on the same wavelength that we do. So, fuck it. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Oh, by the way, we never said spoilers and bad language at the beginning. That's something I forgot. Director Alex, that's on you.
Why is it my fault you forgot it?
Because I asked you and you didn't remind me. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say yeah, she's above morality because she's not human, and because of her fairy nature.
So Stephen, you had thoughts?
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely think. I mean, I definitely think her. I think she has choices. I just think her scope is limited in a certain amount. She has to move in a certain direction, but she does get to make choices in those certain direction. Like, for example, killing Lloyd Slate or torturing him for 10 years or locking him up.
Hold on.
Okay,
like so let me argue.
That to me is where the morality lies. Like, she had to show that Lloyd Slate his actions would be punished, but she didn't have to go that's kind of I see what you're arguing. You're saying that's an essential part of her nature, that she would just have to torture somebody. But to me that just that puts her in the evil camp or the bad guy camp or however we're doing it.
She killed her own daughter.
Harry killed Susan.
Right. But she killed her own daughter. She was compelled to do so, right? Again, you can't bring human examples into this because humans operate differently than fairies do. That's my whole point.
If you had to kill your child in order to save the entire planet, would you do it? Because that's the choice that she was facing.
The ends don't justify the means. I can't answer these questions because I'm not in that situation, and I think that's a valid answer. But as of right now, I would not kill my child to save the. That's part of the reason why I'm not.
Neither would Harry, but that's the choice that Mab had, and she chose the planet because she also knew that her daughter wasn't coming back.
Again, she didn't have a choice. It's her nature to operate that way. She had to kill her daughter. She didn't have a choice. Because otherwise, wouldn't you argue that she would have made the choice to somehow do something that wouldn't kill her?
But right? Maeve could only be saved if Maeve wanted to be saved. Maeve had to make that choice, and she chose to not be saved by Mab. And so Mab was either going to let her daughter kill everybody else or had to kill her daughter. And that was the choice that she had.
I mean, I'd argue that, again, we don't know all the details, so it's hard to... Because what we're really arguing about is the mechanics of what makes a fairy, right?
Yeah, and how they're different from mortals, yeah.
Right. We're not really talking about whether or not Mab's evil. So I'm saying it's evidence that Mab killing her own daughter is evidence. Instead of trying to work with her and in some other way defeat Nemesis, she sees that as the easiest and most efficient option and takes it because that's her fairy nature. That's evidence that she can't control her actions and therefore doesn't have she doesn't suffer the auspices of morality. Am I using that word correctly?
Okay, sorry. So to recap what you just said, did you say that because she killed Maeve, that's evidence that she doesn't have control? Is that what you said?
Yes. Because arguably that would be one of the only actions she could take that she would... I mean, yeah, I would say arguably that's one of the only actions she's taken that we've seen that she might not have wanted to take.
Okay. Yeah, the part that would be interesting, like if we were here to change your mind, mostly I think we wanted to explore the idea, but if we had to, you do have an interesting point of view that I think a lot of people have through history, where it's like, if you're not a human, you're not, subject to the same rules of ethics and morals. I mean, I'm not making a dig at you, but you certainly see some, monarchs and autocrats and things like that take that I'm better than normal people, which is why whatever I do is law. But also you see a similar sort of thing applied to animals, in the sense that if an animal attacks somebody or kills or whatever, it's not like they're tried in a court or anything. Like, they're an animal, that's why they did that, so they're on a different level, so to
Is
speak.
is cancer evil because it kills your grandma? I'm really sorry if anyone who's listening or anyone who's on this show right now has had a grandparent die because of cancer. I shouldn't have said that. If it
No,
kills anyone, is cancer evil?
right, but as much as that sucks to bring up and that sort of thing, like it's a perfect example. Like, it goes back to the same thing with the vampires, and like that argument's way older than the Dresden Files on my end anyway. Where it's like, at that point, do they become a force of nature, and normal morality doesn't apply to them? So, um,
I think the difference for me is that cancer doesn't have a brain. Mab does.
Right.
That
That's
to
the whole.
me,
But
that
that's the
to
whole.
me is the. Sorry.
No, go ahead, finish. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that to me is the fundamental difference. Yes, Mab is kind of a force of nature, but she also has a brain too, and she has actions. So, or she has actions, and as I see it, she can make decisions. So, that to me is what makes her evil.
All right, we're gonna put the yeah. Go ahead, Director Alex. We're gonna move on to.
Yeah, well, we've been talking about what makes Mab a fairy and her nature and stuff, but we also can talk about where she originated from. And before this episode, I'm the director, and I gave Stephen homework to look up things about Hecate and where Mab might have come from that. So, Stephen, tell us what you found and what it might mean for who Mab is and what she does and how important she is.
Well, so the interesting thing is that it almost seems like the fairy queens, and I'm talking both sides, summer and winter, are kind of um it seems like he took two sets of Greek god triplets. Hecate is normally done in or is shown as having three ways. She's known for like actually a lot of things that'll sound familiar. She's associated with like crossroads, entryways, the moon, storms, sorcery, that kind of stuff. And so it really gives her the flavor of Mab in the Dresden. Um, but there's also the Morai, which is the fates. Atropos, Lachesis, and Clotho. And it really seems like out of the six queens, like both of them, they all seem to take up from what I've been reading, they all seem to take up aspects of both. Partially like the Morai, because they deal with fates and stuff like that. And then they also deal like one of their things was if you call the land the Morai, that's like the last. I'm not even sure that I'm saying this right. It's spelled Moirai. That's like the land of the end of the world, and they're also associated with being like gatekeepers, things like that. So it really seems, from what I've read, it really seems like he kind of took both of these and took parts out of both of them and kind of smashed them together. One of the interesting things with Hecate I found was that she's been known to battle the Titans. In Greek mythology, the Olympian, first came the primordial entities, like the first string of gods, and then came the Titans, and then came the Olympians who overthrew the Titans. Titans weren't really evil; they were just the gods before the Olympians. If you've watched Hercules recently, but there were a couple of instances of her being known as being one of the people to fight against the Titans. So if you kind of cast the Outsiders as Titans, it kind of makes sense as to her being the one, holding the gates. I did find it interesting because I didn't know a lot about Greek mythology, but like serious. Like the opening paragraph on Wikipedia just like screams Dresden Files. It really felt like he wrote all the mythos from this by clicking around on Wikipedia, because it's like I'm jumping around and I'm finding like all these connections, and I'm like, oh, there's this over here, and like, but yeah, what else was it? Oh, then there's see if I can find it. Then there's also another thing which I found is interesting is she's also or actually on the Morai side, they are, because they are known as fates, they are also kind of equivalent to truth, which I found really interesting with, the fairies' non-ability to lie. They always have to be the one they always have to be telling the truth, which I found really interesting. So yeah, that's kind of on the, I mean, I could probably go on, but that's kind of on the Greek side, where I'm thinking he got a lot of his, or a lot of it came from. Unfortunately, it does seem like, though, that he used this stuff for flavoring, and he didn't lift Mab wholesale out of any one thing, if that makes sense, because even Mab itself, like the name is from is Romeo and Juliet. Titania is, that's Shakespeare. Titania is from A Midsummer Night's Dream. Hecate was mentioned in another Shakespearean play. So it's, it's hard to say. I was hoping I would find like a smoking gun or something that would like show, why she is the way she is, and all this stuff. But it seems more like he said before, he likes to borrow. He just kind of borrowed pieces from several different areas, but
right.
So-
No, sorry, just real quick, I wanted to say that's why I found the Dresden Files so compelling my own self, is that a lot of the stuff, the more I've researched it, you'll hear the names and you're like, well, that's kind of familiar, and you'll go dig into it, and some things he lifts entirely, and some things it's a hook, and then he builds an entire fish, that is biting into that hook, and it's pretty crazy, some of the stuff that he's done, and he's been able to tie it all together into a compelling mythos and everything. So
exactly, like another thing I kind of, when I went down the rabbit hole, was the Harry's grandmother, the Leonci. She's from the Celtic mythologies. I don't know if I just said that right, Leonci. Um, but it almost seems in certain ways that they kind of, like, he combined that with the Hecate, because like Hecate's actually also known for gods, or for, I'm sorry, dogs. Like that's one of her symbols, which the his grandmother is always trying to turn them into dogs, and then turn them all into dogs and changes. So it definitely seems like there's influence there. I also tried looking up to see like who else, what other names, because me and director Alex had talked about the fact that when he summons Mother Winter, he uses the Atropos name in Skuld. The Skuld is from the Norse, and the Atropos is one of the fates from the Greek. But they say, oh, he didn't use the right name. He used good names, but he didn't use the right name. And then later, Mother Summer kind of hints that maybe they share a name, which is kind of why we went down the Hecate road. Because Hecate started off as one goddess, like in the 6th century, but then at some point she'd kind of taken off on this three-faced, this three-faced aspect. And it's actually like, it's one of those things that's really hard to say, because there's even a list of like triple deities, that they just give you, where it's just different religions, where it all has, and it tends to always be that same maiden, mother, crone kind of structuring on a lot of them. So
I have a question. You're saying that the land of the Morai, however you pronounce that, is kind of like the land of the end of the world, like the way the Never Never and right up against the outer gates?
yeah, that's well, so they kind of use it in another. So yeah, Morai, or Asia, but Aisa. They kind of use it as a land and as a description of these three fate gods, which I also saw a lot in when going down the rabbit hole. Like there was another one. Thanatos, or was that the right one? Where again it was it was a place, but it was also a person and a god, which I found, they were kind of interchangeable. But yeah, that's the connection that I drew with. But it seemed more in the Asia, I don't even know how you pronounce it, AISA. Um, that one was more used for places on the edge of the world or the edge of existence or whatever.
Interesting. So it definitely seems like it influenced at least Butcher's construction of the Never Never, in my mind at least, especially with like the fates and how they might be connected to truth and like this up against what is known. And I think at some point he confirmed that the Gaelic gods, that like Mab and Titania, they took over after the Greek gods kind of passed the reign. And that I've also heard that the name that's shared between the mothers might be Gaia from Greek originally. So
Yeah,
this is interesting.
Gaia was one of the original. So I talked about how there was three different sets of gods in Greek mythology. There were like the primordial ones, the Titans, and the Olympians, like the Zeus and the ones we're more familiar with. Gaia was from the first set, and there was someone called Nyx, which in Skin Game when he's talking to Hades, they mention her and they mention Ferris. I can't even talk. Ferris Fiend. They mention her, and they were all from. Yeah, a lot of them were from the original set, or they were Titans. That were born. Because the second set was born from the original set. But yeah, Gaia was like the mother of all the Titans. Gaia, and usually it was the sky god was Uranus or Uranus, and a lot of them. Let me see if I can get back to it. But and then there was also Nyx, which was mentioned. Oh, what I was saying earlier is Tartarus. Tartarus is both a place. It's like a deep abyss, but it's also a god. It's actually deeper below Hades. It's like an underworld below the underworld. But it's just kind of another example of that Asia. Sometimes they use it as a god, sometimes they use it as a place. It kind of has different meanings. It gets super confusing because it's like in the articles it'll be like, oh, in Greek mythology this is this person, and then in Roman mythology this is that person, but then you go to the remote Roman mythology article and it's just like, oh, and actually they're related to this other Greek god. So it just kind of shows how through history gods have been repurposed and morphed over time and all that kind of stuff, which also happens in the Dresden Files.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. All right, we gotta bring this episode to an end because we're actually over by 10 minutes. Again, you can find us at. Did anyone else have anything? Did I forget anything?
Nope.
Director Alex hates it when I start doing the links and then stop. We're gonna try and have a end of the year show before the end of the year. It'll be short, 15 to 30 minutes, because it's the holiday time and people got things to do. Thank you everyone for joining us, for watching or listening. Again, find all the links at dresdenfilespodcast.com. Find us on Twitter at DresdenCast. Tweet at us, subscribe, rate, give us feedback. Thanks for listening.